So I'm Emanuela Borgi, and my PhD is based here at the University of St Andrews, Scotland. So this is the Department of Social Anthropology, because I'm an anthropologist, but my project is an interdisciplinary project. In fact, I'm based at the School of Medicine here in St Andrews as well, under the supervision of Professor Alexander Baldacchino, who is a psychiatrist. And also, I spent a period at the University of Oxford, Green Templeton College, because as a visiting student, because I wanted to improve my knowledge in medical anthropology. So something that was specifically specialized to bridge the gap between anthropology and psychiatry. So in UK, the structure of the PhD, so I already told you that is an interdisciplinary project, and is 4-year PhD, but with 3 years and a half covered with a scholarship. In my case, was the world-leading scholarship in gender-based violence offered by the University of St Andrews, through the St Leonard College. And then I spent my visiting period at Oxford with sponsorship by Oxford, so by a mentor based at the University of Oxford. And so a PhD for anthropologists is really well structured around the idea of fieldwork. So fieldwork is like the key part of my project. So we have a first phase that is a pre-fieldwork preparation seminar with a very long and intricate ethical application, risk assessment. So to put together documents to allow a researcher to enter actually the fieldwork. Then I pursue my fieldwork, and we will talk later about that. And then a post fieldwork period with seminar and a writing up. In particular, now I'm trying to I'm trying to finalize my PhD dissertation. So now I would like to delve into my projects so rethinking the female body after violence, with a specific focus on mental health issues and marginality and vulnerability. So being an anthropologist, it means that my research it revolves around a long-term fieldwork. So my long-term fieldwork was based in Italy, in Milan, because I'm Italian. So I'm a native speaker. I already had a network because I was a volunteer within the Anti-Violence Center network based in Milan. And also, you know, in terms of accessibility, it was easier for me to access the Italian NHS, and so the Italian system in comparison to the UK one, that is much more complicated to access. So I had the opportunity to participate in a psychotherapy session for survivors of gender-based violence within this anti-violence center. And this allowed me to gather many relevant data about survivors' mental health and narratives of trauma within this very complicated and challenging setting. So I would like to summarize and to explain some key terms like PTSD, trauma, and vulnerability, and then to explore more through ethnographic data and experience of trauma. In particular, I will delve into Eliana's narrative of sexual violence and PTSD. So we have some, I would like to provide some definition about PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder, that stands out in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder by virtue of the direct connection it involves between a particular type of experience, that is the traumatic experience, and psychiatric symptoms. So I wanted to analyze PTSD because it's the most common disorder among survivors of gender-based violence, so among women, in particular vulnerable women that has been exposed to gender-based violence. And so we can define a traumatic experience as an event involving actual or threatened death or serious injury or threat to the physical integrity of self or others. And then we can explore a little bit the idea of vulnerability, because so my analysis, it revolves around narrative of mental health issues in survivor of gender-based violence, but I wanted also to analyze their marginal positioning within society. And I wanted to analyze and pluralize the idea of vulnerability that is directly connected to their mental health issues, as we can see in more detail through Eliana's stories. So the term vulnerability was firstly introduced as a response to the hazard-oriented perception of risk disaster in the 1970s, so within the social science. So in this kind of idea of vulnerability, we can see is directly related to the evaluation of risk, a concept that combined the susceptibility of people and communities exposed with their social, economic, and cultural ability to cope with the damage that could occur. And this is like the first, so vulnerability related to risk is the first step within this idea in the social science. But in order to pluralize vulnerability, I suggest that vulnerability is an existential emotional state related to physical contingency. So, and we will say through also, we can analyze it through the idea of embodiment of vulnerability and trauma. So this is a graphical representation of an attempt to actually widening the concept of vulnerability. And so in this concept, in this idea of vulnerability, we can see that we have we analyze individual characteristic of being at risk to further expand to multidimensional ideas of vulnerability that encompass physical, social, economic, environmental, and institutional features. So this is an attempt to think of vulnerability as something that is a multi-layer. So this is a multi-layer idea of vulnerability, but still what I wanted to do was to analyze this concept through a subjective, so through a subjective point of view, and a bodily, temporally, and subjective informed point of view. So through Eliana's story, I show how exposure to trauma affects survivor way of being in the world. So with a phenomenological approach that can actually connect trauma with everyday life practices and strategy to cope with trauma, violence, and vulnerability. As I described Eliana's PTSD symptoms, I examined the disruptive impact of these mental health issues on her daily life, subjectivity, and bodily perception. So Eliana is a survivor of gender-based violence, sexual violence specifically. Her neighbor stalked her for months, obsessively following and phoning her. These obsessive and scary behaviors escalated when he attacked and raped Eliana while she was alone in a park. After these traumatic events, Eliana experienced a series of symptoms that scares her. And this is an extract from an interview and from her narratives of trauma. I'm a nurse, and I thought that were the symptoms of neurological disease. I had numerous hallucinations, tremors, a racing heart for hours. I was terrified of my memory lapses and lack of concentration. Sometimes I was not even able to remember where I was and who I was. When I started hearing voices, I was convinced that I was going crazy. I was haunted by flashbacks of the assault, but what scared me most were my nightmares. I dreamed of mutilated women, female bodies, and dolls reduced to pieces. So we can see many symptoms of PTSD, and she tried to narrate and to explain them. So I will also highlight that the experience of trauma, it would be related to Eliana socioeconomic marginality and financial problem issues and hardship. Because after experiencing sexual violence, Eliana developed avoidance symptoms. She could not handle the presence of a man close to her. It was unbearable for her to share the same environment with a man. For this reason, she was unable to perform her job as a nurse. Since she had lost her job, she experienced financial issue and long-lasting socioeconomic marginality, because in Italy and in Europe now, because of the neoliberal model, it's very difficult to access financial support for vulnerable women, migrant women, and in general for survivors of gender-based violence. So another important aspect that is related to PTSD is the temporality of trauma. So I've noticed that survivors engage with trauma and with time in a very specific and subjective way. Time is no longer linear, and they are trapped in this sensation that trauma is always with them in the past, in the present, and will be with them in the future. And so for this reason, Alan Young, a famous medical anthropologist, defined a PTSD as the disease of time. So we can see that there is that the relationship between past and traumatic events lie at the heart of traumatic memory. So the way in which survivors engage with their memories of trauma. So I suggest that the understanding of the disorder requires an understanding of the relationship that women establish with time. And making sense of how survivors engage with time reveals why PTSD is defined as the disease of time. And so I wanted to highlight what Eliana said. While that man was attacking me, I felt like dying. I was amazed that a few days later, I felt strong, as if I'd been able to overcome these terrible events. But it wasn't like that. As the days and months passed, I was more and more scared and traumatized. So this idea of, so at the beginning, she was convinced that she was able to overcome the traumatic events. And then she started developing more and more symptoms, and she get more vulnerable, and nightmares and flashback really had a very strong impact on her everyday life over the months. May I ask you about the time? 3 minutes? Okay, perfect. So I think that it is time to sum up a bit my presentation, and basically to explain that. So I listed roughly my aim, and so I wanted to, through my ethnographic inquiries, through ethnography, I would like to bring some subjectivity in studies of trauma. And in particular, I think that it's very important to conduct long-term field work, to really engage with survivors, to have the time to spend, so to have the time to collect narratives, to collect interviews. And it is important, so for this reason, it's important to gain the trust of the humanitarian sector, in my case, so the humanitarian system related to anti-violence in Milan. And it's also important to collaborate over the time with mental health professionals in order to have the possibility to participate in activities that are aimed in activities that want to empower and improve women's mental health. So for this reason, I would like also to, so one of my aim is also to promote a more inclusive and trauma-informed setting by enhancing the understanding of cultural diversity, because in my fieldwork, I met also many migrant women. And for this reason, is important also to think culturally of trauma, because we have a Western idea of trauma, but there are many other ideas that can be conveyed and can be researched to have a multi-layer and better understanding of trauma and mental health. So thank you very much. I think I can